Peace be with you. My name is Alan Kiesler. We're at the Institute of All Intelligent Life, back with a new exciting class today, Monday, the 21st of November, 2016. So we are looking into a very interesting topic that I've been studying about and meditating about. That is the alliance and what role the alliance may have played in the election of Donald Trump, and especially how that relates to the role of the FBI. So I'm going to just make a few comments first and then get into this topic. Well, we're having trouble again with the connection, so maybe I have to go outside again. I'm sorry this keeps happening. I'm going to have to complain to my cell phone carrier to please try to improve my signal here. So I'm going to go to the same place where I've been going to get a better signal. It's a beautiful morning here. The sun will be rising soon. And I'm going to sit down here where let me turn on the light to get a little more light here because the sun has not yet risen. Let's see how it is if I sit here. Okay. Sorry for this interruption here. All right, we will try again. Now I'm getting note this connection is weak here too, but we will keep going and hope it doesn't get cut off now. This is okay for now. When the weather gets colder, it might be really hard being outside, but for now, it's okay. So I was starting to say that this is going to be a very interesting class about the role of the alliance, which is an alliance of both Earth-based and extraterrestrial groups who are working together. Their main purpose is to reveal the entire truth about the extraterrestrial presence and to fight against the cabal. The cabal, for those of you who don't know, is a group of also again Earth-based and extraterrestrial groups who are very evil and selfish, trying to manipulate and control humanity. And they have been trying, or I should say they had been trying, because now they have failed. They had been trying to establish a one-world government under their control, a fascist dictatorship, which they could force everyone to do what they want and really totally control everyone. That has failed, that program of the cabal, the so-called Illuminati, and the Orion group, as it's called, the main members of the cabal's extraterrestrial allies were from the Orion constellation, and they were reptilians. Of course, they're still around, but they are losing the fight now. So those are the two sides that we're talking about in this struggle. One, the evil, satanic earthlings and extraterrestrials who are trying to control all of humanity. And on the other hand, the good side, the angelic extraterrestrials and good human beings who are working together to defeat the cabal and to reveal the entire truth about the extraterrestrial presence. So I believe it was the Benenton Group who Hillary Clinton and the Democrats had hired to do polls for them before the election, that is back in October, and they discovered by their polls, although this was of course not revealed in the mass media, which is controlled by the cabal, that Hillary Clinton was increasingly losing. Donald Trump was gaining in popularity in the United States. So this information is all available if you want to find the details, especially on exopolitics.org. So you can look that website up if you haven't already been on it. A lot of good information about what I'm discussing now. The other source of much of this information is from Corey Goode. So you can also go to his website, spherebeingalliance.org. So those are the two main sources of this information we're going to be talking about today. So Hillary Clinton's polling organization, or a group that was helping her do this campaign by polling, finding out what's really going on, they discovered through the month of October that she was losing, especially when the FBI announced, that's just about 10 or 11 days before the election, that they were reopening their investigation of Hillary Clinton's illegal activities, and which they had been carrying out some months ago, but then they closed, saying there wasn't anything criminal and worthy of their further investigation. So what is going on here? What's especially shocking is that the director of the FBI, Mr. Comey, I believe is his name, he then suddenly, 2 days before the election, he announced that there was nothing in that additional information they had received that warranted a further criminal investigation. So this is very interesting, and I myself was confused. I think I did make some mention about that on my class back a week or some 10 days ago perhaps, about the time of the election, when I saw what was going on with the FBI's announcements, which of course came out in the mass media first, that the FBI was reopening its investigation of Hillary Clinton's possible criminal activities due to additional information they had received, and that being just less than 2 weeks before the election, and then just 2 days before the election, announcing that they were closing that investigation after all. They weren't going to pursue a criminal investigation. So of course this really affected the people of the United States, this information which came out very widely, even in the mass media. So according to Michael Sala's investigation and explanation of this, what happened is this. Well, let me give a little bit more background first. We have to understand that a major struggle is going on between the cabal and its extraterrestrial allies, the Orion group of reptilians and some insectoids were in that group, and on the other hand the Alliance, which consists of the good people in secret space programs, good extraterrestrials, and good people in the FBI, in the United States military, in other groups, including actually Russia at the present time. President Putin is working with the Alliance also. So the FBI, just like even the CIA and many other organizations, the American government itself, there are good people and there are bad people. There are strong and courageous people who are fighting for the truth, and then there are weak people who are, falling prey to the threats of the cabal, which are valid threats. A lot of people have been killed for standing up to the cabal. But now the tide is turning. The tide has been turning for at least a number of months, maybe you can say a couple of years, where especially the Sphere Being Alliance, which is an extraterrestrial group, has become very active in our solar system over the past only a very few years. So as a result of their intervention or their support of the good forces on our planet, the whole situation has been changing. So when this Benenton group reported to Hillary Clinton and her campaign manager, John Podesta especially, that Hillary is going to lose the election, that is the cabal, and because she certainly is part of the cabal and she was the candidate that the cabal wanted to win the election, they started discussing, and these came out in WikiLeaks emails had been hacked. John Podesta especially, and other people's emails WikiLeaks has hacked, and they discovered that in response to this polling, which showed that Hillary Clinton was losing, and she was losing more and more badly as the days went by in October, they discussed what to do to prevent this from happening. And they discussed different alternatives, how they could frighten the American populace into maybe not going to the polls, especially Donald Trump type supporters. And they discussed creating a false epidemic, just like so many epidemics. What's it called? HIV, the AIDS epidemic was one, was created, artificially created, and by the cabal. And many of the other so-called swine virus, the avian virus, these viruses which created big scares for a short time, they were also created by the cabal. So they thought we can create another big, even bigger such worldwide epidemic, and that will allow us to intervene somehow. But they finally decided that they would stage a false flag alien invasion. Just like most of you probably know that 9/11, the so-called attack by Osama bin Laden and so-called Muslim terrorists on the World Trade Center in New York in 2001 on September 11th, and on the Pentagon, that this was a false flag. You probably know that. This was not at all done by a few people sitting in a cave in Afghanistan. No, it was the whole World Trade Center buildings, not only 1 and 2, which collapsed. Also, World Trade Center 7 collapsed without any airplane hitting it. They just collapsed straight down. It was clearly a demolition. It was not a result of the airplanes hitting them that those 2 huge buildings suddenly fell down, just exactly like a controlled demolition. And of course, the building number 7, which was never reported in the mass media, actually, hardly at all, and it's not even mentioned in the official 9/11 Commission report, that building number 7 also collapsed. So this was clearly a false flag. It was created by a number of people, including the Vice President of the United States. Dick Cheney was one of the main persons who was coordinating that event. And the American secret government and secret intelligence agencies, and Israel had a major role to play also in the 9/11 false flag. So that's a whole other topic which you can do research on yourself if you are not familiar with this information I've just briefly mentioned. But the plan was then this plan has been in place for many, many years. At the appropriate time, the cabal would create the biggest false flag you can imagine, create a huge alien invasion, because the cabal has many flying saucers, many space vehicles that look just like what we are familiar with as extraterrestrials crafts, and they were planning to use those to make it seem like there was a huge extraterrestrial invasion of our planet. And of course, Hollywood has been making many movies to prepare us, not only American people, but whole of humanity, for such a possibility by making movies about evil extraterrestrials invading the Earth. So this was the plan that the cabal had decided upon, that before the election we will now create this false flag. And they have a lot of technologies, holograms. They have the ability to reflect holographic projections off the lower atmosphere and make it seem like there is something happening in the sky that looks just like it's real to ordinary people. And so they were planning to create these holographic images and make it look like there is an alien invasion going on. And with that, President Obama was going to declare a national emergency, an international emergency, and was going to postpone the election. And then the plan was that he would just turn over the presidency to Hillary Clinton. This was the cabal's plan. So, interesting information, huh? This is really fascinating and even shocking and hard to believe perhaps, but hear me out for a little while more, and then you can make your own decision about what you want to accept of this. And as I said, you can do your own further research about it. So the FBI, again, there are good people in the FBI and there are bad people, but the good people in the FBI, they decided, working together with the alliance, with the extraterrestrial and Earth-based alliance, which is working to defeat the cabal, they decided to make this announcement as a threat that we will reopen this investigation of Hillary Clinton. And of course she has performed so many criminal activities, so that was going to totally change the situation. And of course they also threatened that they will expose this whole plan for an alien invasion. So that's why, just less than 2 weeks, it was only 10 or 11 days as I recall before the election, FBI Director Comey came out with this announcement. So it was kind of mysterious why he did that suddenly, and it was the cabal were outraged that how can he do this, he's trying to influence the election, etc. But he was trying to influence the election, but really he was warning the cabal that if they go through with this planned alien invasion, that the FBI is going to take an active role in opposing it and exposing it as a false flag. So then there were some meetings, secret meetings of course, between the Earth-based alliance along with their secret space program allies and extraterrestrial allies. They met with some leaders of the cabal, and an agreement was worked out that they would not carry out that false flag invasion and alien invasion, and that they would allow the election to take place. And with that, the other half of that agreement was that the FBI would announce that they were not going to pursue this investigation, that they had not found anything criminal in the new information they had obtained. So the election happened as scheduled, and the cabal was forced to drop their plan to create a false flag alien invasion. By the way, this is an old plan. If you haven't done it yet, do some research on this. Carol Rosin, C-A-R-O-L-R-O-S-I-N. I have mentioned her in the past in this class. She was the personal assistant or secretary to Wernher von Braun, who was the father of American rocketry, a German scientist who had been brought to America after World War II and really was the leader of the American rocketry and space program. And he had told her in the closing years of his life that they are planning to create a false flag, a number of false flags, in order to, that is they means the cabal, in order to try to consolidate their control of the world. And they have been at this, the First World War, even the Second World War, these were actually created by the cabal in order to consolidate their power, to try to create a one world government. And of course, after the First World War, well, one thing is that all the nations of the world increasingly became indebted to the cabal, to the bankers, international banksters, and huge debts were incurred. And of course the cabal also had a large role in controlling the armaments industry, so they made a lot of money off of that too. And at the end of World War I, they tried to introduce the League of Nations as a one world government. Anyway, that failed, but they did start World War II after some time. They were behind that again to make money by loaning money to all the governments. They have to take loans to fight the war. And of course the armaments industry, again, they made lots of money. And at the end of World War II, they introduced the United Nations. Again, this was the plan for creating a one world government. Of course, the United Nations was supposed to help establish world peace, but we have seen it has totally failed in that. Because the real purpose behind it, by the people who were controlling it, was the cabal, and they did not really want world peace. They just wanted more wars so they could consolidate their control more, because hardly anything can frighten people more and get them to agree to accept like a martial law or a government dictatorship than a war. So these First and Second World Wars were created by the cabal, and they had a plan to create the Third World War, as I've discussed in the past. So Carol Rosin, Wernher von Braun's secretary, personal assistant, she had revealed, and this is, you can find this if you just do a little research on the internet, she testified how Wernher von Braun had said, because he was in with the cabal leadership, he had said, he was a good man in the sense that he tried to expose them. He said that they had a plan to create false flags, and in fact long before 9/11 and long before the rise of so-called Muslim terrorism, which was also a cabal creation, Wernher von Braun had told Carol Rosin, and Carol Rosin was trying to get the word out, that they were going to create, after the communist world, which was at that time, when Wernher von Braun was telling this to Carol Rosin, at that time they had created the communist world as the enemy, and that the communist revolution was also done by the cabal in order to destroy the Russian Tsar. And the Russian Tsarist government was opposed to the cabal, one of the greatest powers in the world opposing the cabal at that time. So they created the communist revolution in order to kill off the Tsar and his royal family and introduce a government that was under their control, which they did do. So Wernher von Braun explained to Carol Rosin that this creation of communism by the cabal was one step in their plan to create a one world government by creating enemies and false enemies. And after that, they would introduce third world rogue countries, Muslim terrorists, as the enemy. So this whole creation of Al-Qaeda, the whole creation of Osama bin Laden, the whole creation of ISIS, this also is all a cabal creation in an attempt to create an enemy for the so-called free world, so-called Western free world, after communism versus capitalism now was to be Islamic, so-called Islamic terrorism against the so-called free world, or the Christian world, the clash of civilizations. That's another cabal plot. So then after that, Wernher von Braun told Carol Rosin they're going to create an false flag alien invasion. So this plan for an alien invasion has been in the works for decades, at least since 1960s, 1970s. They had this whole plan in place. And of course, after the alien false flag invasion, then they would introduce martial law all over the world. The whole world would become terrified, and they would agree to submit to this one world government. That was the plan. So, of course, the good news is that agreement was made that they're not going to introduce this false flag invasion because it was going to be exposed first, and that's why the FBI then announced just 2 days before the election that they have not found anything criminal in Hillary Clinton's activities. So the election happened. Of course, Donald Trump won. So this was not the cabal's plan. They were hoping and praying and producing all these false polls and producing all the false information that Hillary Clinton was going to win. They still, to a substantial extent, can rig the elections. They can announce false results, as they have been doing. Perhaps you don't know, but it was very clear at the time that George W. Bush, both in the year 2000 and 2004, the two elections that he supposedly won, he actually lost both those elections. But there was a lot of electronic polling was done, and they simply announced false results. So George W. Bush supposedly won the elections in 2000 and 2004, and he became the president, but he actually lost both those elections because they rigged the polls, the electronic polling especially. So a lot of people in America have found out about that. Of course, George W. Bush had even went to the Supreme Court because of people pointing out the irregularities in the election, but the Supreme Court finally decided no, he's won, which was false judgment. And so now they were planning to do the same thing, to make sure that Hillary Clinton won, just as George W. Bush had won. And I believe they did substantially rig the election, but they were not able to do it enough to ensure their candidate's victory, and Donald Trump won. And as I've said several times, I'm firmly convinced that Donald Trump is not part of the cabal. I may be wrong, but and he certainly is a very wealthy businessman and therefore must have been involved with the cabal to some extent, but I believe at heart he is a good man, meaning that he's not part of the cabal. And he, in fact, is going to help expose the cabal when he becomes the President of the United States, God willing. That he will stand up to the pressure that Obama could not stand up to. I have explained this also before. I believe that President Obama, maybe I should say was rather than is, I believe he was not such a bad man, as a bad president as he's turned out to be. But when he was elected in January of 2008, the week or couple of weeks before he was to become the president of the United States, after he had been elected, but before he had been inaugurated, he was visited by George H.W. Bush and all the other living presidents of the United States, met with him at the White House, and he was secretly threatened that he has to do what they say, that is the cabal. Otherwise, he and his family will be in great danger. So, unfortunately, Mr. Obama could not stand up to that pressure, and throughout his tenure as President of the United States, he has mostly been doing what he was told to do by the cabal. Just one example, he promised, and it seemed he was really very sincere in his promise, that he would close Guantanamo Bay, the American military prison in Cuba, which he did not do, of course. It's still there, it's still open, so he made that very, very clear, strong promise that he would close it down immediately after becoming president, and he did not, because the cabal warned him that if you do, you're going to be in trouble. Not only you, your family will be tortured and killed, I suppose. I won't be sure exactly what they told him, but they threatened him enough that he became afraid, and since then, for the last 8 years, he's been doing what they tell him to do. Almost 8 years it's been. So I believe that Donald Trump will be much stronger and stand up to them, and of course he will have more support from the alliance and the extraterrestrials, the good extraterrestrials. So let us hope and pray that Donald Trump is able to stand up to the threats of the cabal, as Obama was not able to do, and he will reveal the extraterrestrial presence. I have mentioned before that Obama wanted to do this. He was planning to do this. And in fact, at the opportunity that he saw was when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, he was going to say something about the presence of the extraterrestrial groups on our planet and through our history. And he was threatened. If you remember this, the so-called Norway spiral, a very strange thing, a spiral shape appeared in the skies above Norway just at that time when Obama was going to give his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. and that was a warning to him that we're going to do something to you if you disclose the extraterrestrial presence. So he became afraid and he did not make that announcement. So I believe that Donald Trump is going to make that announcement. So our time is about up, so I just want to say one last thing about this. This is quite an amazing story. I really was studying this and puzzling about this behavior of the FBI directors announcing first that they're reopening the investigation of Hillary Clinton, and then that they're just 2 days before the election they're not going to reopen it. They didn't find anything criminal, although everyone knows there's lots of criminal things there in Hillary Clinton's actions. But so what was going on? This, what I've just explained now, is, I believe, the correct explanation. So the last thing I wanted to say before I end is, because I'm sure there are many, many questions, well, if Donald Trump is a good person, why didn't you vote for him? Why didn't I vote for him? And besides that, he has said so many, not only wrong things, but horrible things. And he has taken some really completely indefensible positions on some things. He is a businessman. He is an investor in a lot of very, very harmful projects, just like the Dakota Access Pipeline and other oil industry efforts to do fracking, for example, which is very harmful to the environment. So he supported those things, which is one reason I could never vote for him. And of course, as all of you are certainly familiar, he has taken a very anti-Islamic position against Muslims. He's made many statements, and he has made threats that he will deport not only Muslims, but Mexicans and other immigrants to the United States, and he will not allow any more, especially Muslim immigrants. So this is, of course, how the mass media presented him to us. And of course there's some truth in it, although they exaggerated everything, certainly, because they were doing everything they could to try to turn people against him so they would not vote for him. But, and this is my conclusion, which I've mentioned before briefly, that Donald Trump actually is not against Islam. I posted a short video of him, which was also put on Pakistani television, where Donald Trump was asked about Pakistan, and he said, "I love Pakistan. I love Pakistan." So that was quite an amazing statement after his so-called anti-Muslim position. So I think he's not really against Islam. He's not really against Muslims. He has just been misinformed about Islam. And of course, everyone in America has been repeatedly bombarded with this false propaganda against Islam. The whole so-called Islamic terrorist movement around the world is also a creation of the cabal, and they created it and then they advertised it. Their media has, reported on so many so-called Muslim terrorist attacks, which really have been organized by the cabal. But Donald Trump including, the American people have fallen for those false creations, those false flag attacks, and the whole creation of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The people in America mostly believed that that really would happen. They didn't realize that that was a creation by the CIA and by Mossad, by the Israeli secret intelligence agency. So Donald Trump also, either he believed this or he realized that this is what the American people believe, and so that he could, take a strong position on that and therefore get more votes, get more support. He is a politician as well as a businessman, a very competent one, obviously, to be able to win the election against the wishes of most of the cabal, at least. So this is my class on the alliance, the FBI, and the election of Donald Trump. So I'm going to turn now to your questions and comments. It's been a half an hour. And let's see how everyone is responding to this. I'm expecting some interesting responses. Some people, no doubt, will object. तो गुदास आशना says, आपने दुरुस्त फरमाया बाबा जी. Thank you. I'm glad you can agree with that. It's quite a shocking story. So Hadi Rizvi says, is the president-elect a part of the cabal or the alliance? Um, I am confident that he is not part of the cabal. I think he's obviously had some sort of relationship with the cabal. He must have, in order to be able to be such a successful man in his businesses and his development projects all over the world. He's a billionaire. So he must have had some sort of agreement with the cabal, that he must have been able to work with them to some extent. But I believe he is not a evil, satanic individual like the cabal is. And so I don't think he's part of the cabal in that sense. He certainly has had to work with them to some extent. And I'm confident that the alliance supported him in his election, because they could see that he is maybe not a good man and totally good man, but much, much better than Hillary Clinton. If Hillary Clinton had won, she probably would have led to war with Russia. That's how she was talking. So Trump not only has been talking, but I'm sure he's going to act in a way to create an alliance with Russia rather than create an inimical stand, make Russia more and more the enemy of the United States. No, he is going to make Russia and the United States allied with each other, and probably he will announce the extraterrestrial presence also, hopefully quite soon. That's my prayer and hope, and I think, so that's my answer. I don't think he's part of the cabal, although he's of course had to work with them to a certain extent to be such a successful international businessman, but he certainly has the support of the alliance. All right. Abdul Rahman, what you say about Pakistan? I've said many times that I believe Pakistan will become united and peaceful on the basis of pure Islam, and that will create a new way of life which will spread all over the world. World peace, international justice, love between all people. That's what I say is going to happen, inshallah, starting in Pakistan. So you can do it. The Pakistanis can do it. Gemma Art, what do you think an ordinary person who has no power over these evil people can do which can make any kind of difference for this world? Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Let us not underestimate the power of our own consciousness. If we pray and meditate, that has an incredible impact. And that's why I've started this class. I started it, yesterday or today, depending on where you are. Here in California, it's now the morning of Monday, so Sunday evening, and it was Monday morning, this morning in Pakistan. I've started a meditation and prayer session just with this purpose, to help us, ordinary people, do something to counteract the evil people. It will make a huge difference if we just pray and meditate, especially in a group. So that's one thing we can do. And the other thing really is the visualize, the power of visualization. People don't understand. We human beings do not understand our power. We can simply visualize, meditate, see the future in a certain light, and we can bring that about. That is extremely powerful. Meditation, prayer, fixing our mind on something. That's how everything happens. Whatever is going to happen, we first think about what we want to do. And that thought, then if we meditate on it, then we can carry it out. So this has been part of the cabal's plan, is to deceive human beings to prevent us from finding out how powerful we really are. They want us to feel helpless and hopeless. And that's their main enemy, that's their main weapon that they use against their enemies. So we are their enemies, and they have been trying to make us feel hopeless and helpless, powerless. But actually we have great power, so let us use that power by meditating on peace, seeing in our mind that we can establish unity and love amongst our circle of friends and society, amongst our groups of, and within our countries and around the world and throughout the universe. Just meditate on this. Visualize peace. And that will be something very, very powerful that each one of us can do to make a difference in this world. And we do have power over the evil people. Don't think we don't. We do have great power. And as I mentioned day before yesterday, or yesterday, I guess, what part of the world you're in, I remember specifically, and just perhaps in the very last class or one before that, that there was a scientific experiment done. I can't remember the exact date, but it was at least 20 or 25 years ago, maybe more than that, 20, 30 years ago, I can't remember, in which 7,000 people meditated together just as an experiment to see what impact that would have on the world. And criminal acts, that is violent crimes, terrorist acts all over the world decreased. Somehow this figure of 72% sticks in my mind. A 72% decrease in violent activity happened as a result of that group meditation of 7,000 people all over the world. So our meditation and our visualization of peace will bring it about, inshallah. So don't feel hopeless. We have great power. The power of prayer and the power of meditation. So Yasir Akun has written, Assalamu alaikum. Sir, how your day is going. I asked you how you come toward Sufism and who is your murshid or teacher in this field. Well, this is a little off of our topic, but I will briefly say that, in fact, I was just asked this question within the last day or two. My murshid is also my good wife. She was my murshid first. Carol Peterson is her maiden name, and now her name is Carol Peterson Kiesler. But the name that I knew her by when I first met her is Kalili. Kalili is a very deep spiritual name, which actually when one Hawaiian, the place where I met my murshid was in a conference in New Mexico in 2010, where she was one of the speakers, and there was a Hawaiian woman there who became very upset and angry when she heard that this woman is calling herself Kalili, because Kalili is a very powerful, sacred, special name in the Hawaiian language, which Kalili did not even know that. This is just a name that she had been called from childhood even. So her name that I knew her by at first was Kalili, but the name her parents gave her was Carol Ann Peterson. So she is a very, very deep spiritual personality, and I consider her my murshid. I'm not a very good disciple, but I'm trying to, and I've learned so much from her. What I'm doing right now would have been totally impossible, absolutely inconceivable, if it had not been for her help and guidance. So she is my teacher and my guide. And you asked how you come towards Sufism. So this is a long story. Many years ago, back in the 1980s especially, I was in Pakistan a lot of the time, and I met a number of different Sufis. I don't think I can go into that. If you review some of my earlier videos, I certainly have talked about it in detail, and I will again in the future. I'll somehow post that information. But thank you for that very good question. And Sargardan Fani asks, what is Cabal? Very good question. The Cabal is also, they call themselves the Illuminati. This is a group which has existed for many centuries, if not many millennia, secretly. And basically they are, on the human side, they are a group of very few, maybe a few hundred people. In the inner core, maybe even less than that. But they are very, very wealthy bankers, especially, banksters. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the energy companies, oil companies especially around the world, they are the CEOs of international multinational corporations, and especially the multinational banks, the World Bank, these sorts of Bank of International Settlements. These are all cabal. So those are their main activities, and they involve a lot of royalty. A lot of European royalty is in the cabal also. So I posted something not very long ago. If you go down my Facebook page, you come to that picture of which it says Jews, and then there's a picture of these Jews who are carrying placards saying that Zionism is the opposite of Judaism, and we Jewish people do not support the Israeli government and the idea of Israel as a Jewish state. So, and then on the bottom of that picture, there are two halves of it. On the bottom there's a picture of Americans waving Israeli flags and having some procession or some march supporting Israel. So the Zionists are also the cabal. The cabal have this plan to create one world government under their leadership, and I believe their idea is the capital would be in Jerusalem on the Dome of the Rock, Mount, where the old Temple of Solomon was. They present that picture. So this is a very brief description of the cabal. And of course I haven't mentioned that behind the cabal there are extraterrestrials also. From the Orion constellation, a group of reptilians mainly, who have for thousands of years really been trying to gain control, total control over this planet. And they are the allies of the cabal, the extraterrestrial group that's working with them. So it's really, really a lot of information you have to digest in order to understand the cabal, but it has to do with the control of money all over the world, all these central banks all over the world, which again is an old system from Roman times or even from Babylonian times of creating money as a way to control people, to put people in debt. And that's of course what they've done. Every government in the world is incredibly indebted to the cabal banksters. So they control the armaments industries mostly. They create wars, as I've mentioned earlier today. All right, what other questions do we have? Saima Aziz Mirza always has good comments. Alan Salam, I requested yesterday to reconsider morning class timing. I would be thankful indeed. USA should not be against any country. True Americans should help establish peace in the world. Well, I'm willing to consider a different time. Tell me what time is better for you. Somebody said they live in England, and so it's the middle of the night when we have that new class we just started yesterday, that meditation session. So it's, after midnight sometime, 1 or 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning in London, at the time that we have our new class starting at 6:30 a.m. in Pakistan. And somebody complained also about Dubai. It's much earlier than that in the morning. So I'm willing to reconsider that time, but it's going to be hard to make it good for everybody all over the world. Okay, we have Shoaib Shamsi Saib again. I've mentioned before that when I was in Karachi earlier this year, I lived for several days with Shoaib Shamsi Saib, a very fine gentleman. And he has a comment here. Salam alam, good to see you radiating. Have you followed stories related to Nibiru planet? Conspiracy theorists say it's coming and will not be good for our planet, but to put it mildly. Thank you very, very much. That's a very, very good question, Shoaib Sahib. Thank you. Nibiru is a false flag. It's part of the cabal's plan to frighten humanity. And along with the false flag alien invasion, this creation of a Nibiru coming into our solar system and threatening our planet, and therefore we have to have a one world government to protect us from Nibiru. It's all part of a cabal false flag plan to terrify the inhabitants of the world. My understanding is that Zecharia Sitchin, you may have heard of, because he was one of the first ones to popularize the idea. I think he was a pretty good man. in many ways. I think he did help a lot of people understand. He helped me understand a lot in his earlier books especially. He shared a lot of information that's not completely true, but I think there was a lot of truth in it. But I believe that he fell prey to a CIA plot to create Nibiru as some dangerous object, planet, whatever, coming towards our solar system and coming towards our Earth, which will create massive havoc and destruction here. And in response to that, then we needed a powerful world government which they would control. So do not worry about Nibiru, all this terrifying information that is being broadcast, and they try to make it seem like it's secret information so that people will think, oh, it's not the cabal doing this, the cabal is suppressing this information, but actually they are secretly spreading that information. The truth about Nibiru, in my understanding, is this. I may be wrong, but this is my understanding, that I'm quite certain that our star, our sun, has a companion star, just like most stars do. Most stars are not single stars. Many of them, most of them are double stars or even triple stars. Some stars, there may be even 4 or more stars that are closely related with each other. So our companion star for our sun is a red dwarf, which means it's invisible to our eyes. It's an infrared star. It gives off infrared light. It's very dense, it's very small, therefore it's very heavy for its size, and that is the cause of the so-called precession of the equinoxes, which we have been falsely told by the Cabal is the result of the wobbling of the Earth on its axis. If you're familiar with the precession of the equinoxes, every 25,920 years or so, there is a shift. They say the Earth wobbles on its axis, so there's a shift in the position of the stars. The equinox goes through different constellations along the ecliptic. Anyway, that's a little technical terminology, but so this, you've heard about perhaps the coming of the age of Aquarius. That means the spring equinox is moving from the constellation of Pisces into the constellation of Aquarius. So the real cause of that precession of equinox is not the wobbling of the Earth on its axis, but it is the rotation of the sun around this companion star, or this sun and the companion star rotating around each other. And that star evidently also has its planets, as most stars do. So the two stars, our sun and that companion star, which I believe is what Nibiru really is, they sometimes come closer and sometimes go farther apart. But I don't believe that Nibiru actually ever comes into our solar system. That would create tremendous havoc. But it is possible, perhaps, I don't know, that some of the outer planets of Nibiru, of that star, our companion star, come close to our solar system. That's the worst that could happen. And that could create some disturbance in the solar system. But I'm not at all sure. And maybe that's not true at all. That they actually come close enough together that there would be that sort of interaction of the outer planets with each other. So please don't worry, Shoaib Sahib, about all this propaganda about Nibiru. That is simply a fear-spreading campaign by the Cabal. Saad Istiaq, kindly pray for the safe lives of Rohingya Muslims suffering by Burma. Yes, this is a great tragedy, and it's shocking that a Buddhist monk could promote such hate, and totally contrary, of course, to the teachings of the Buddha, who taught ahimsa. His basic principle was peace and non-harming, and the Buddhists of Burma are killing, threatening, burning their homes to the Rohingya Muslims. It's a very great tragedy, and I do pray for them, and I hope that we can all publicize this enough so that we can get the international community to put pressure on the Burmese government to stop this. Otherwise, it doesn't look like they're going to do anything about it. So we must publicize it. So thank you very much for bringing up this topic. All right, well, our time is past. We've been going on for quite a bit more than 45 minutes, but it's been a very, very interesting topic. So thank you all very, very much for listening. And I do plan to discuss more about this, especially if there are any good questions. Um, this is a very, very important thing to understand what is happening in the world today. Okay, thank you very much. May God protect us all.